Good afternoon, everybody. So sorry that we ended up having to cancel the in-person class, but I'm hoping that everybody is going to be able to get what they can from the class today, even though we're not meeting in person. So I wanted to run through just a couple basics about the webinars in case you guys haven't attended them before. So by default, everybody will be starting on mute. We're also going to be using the Q&A button for any questions that you may have. The chat section is going to be better served for comments, stories that you guys want to share, whatever the case may be. Just try to make sure that if you have a question that you would like to ask, that it gets put into the Q&A section. If only just because that's going to make things a little easier for me to recognize that there's been a question posed, and it just gives me a little bit more of a notification if there's a question, but the chat's kind of quiet. But the session will be recorded. I can send you guys a recording of this video after it's over. And I did want to let you guys know if you have any problems during the course with any technical issues, you guys lose audio, lose video, whatever the case may be, just let me know immediately. You can do this just by posting into the Q&A chat, hitting that raise hand button, or giving us a call at the service desk if worse comes to worse. But let's go ahead and get started. Just so you guys are aware, this is not a CE credit class. Oh, and also another change that's specifically for the matrix class. This is going to be just 2 hours instead of 3. Typically the in-person class, the hands-on class, it's a little bit longer just because more people are going to ask questions. You kind of have to navigate around and follow along, so it takes just a little bit extra time. But since we're just going to be kind of giving you guys the goods and you're not going to have to act on those, you can even watch the recording later and practice at your leisure. We'll just try and get straight to the information. All right. I also wanted to mention what the buttons do. So down at the bottom of your screen, you'll have the chat option. Again, this is where you guys can post any comments, stories, whatever, anecdotes, Q&A for any questions that you may have. Just another mention about Q&A. It does leave me the option to have a question open. So instead of just answering the question and then moving on, if it's something that we're going to be addressing later or something that I might need to research, I can leave that question open and then we can answer it later. But we also have the raise hand option, especially since there's only a couple of you guys here today. Feel free to use the raise hand option liberally if you guys would like to ask any questions or something. Normally, if we have shorter classes or classes where there's a lot of people, I try to avoid using that, but it's going to be a pretty close-knit group today. We're not going to have to worry too much about interruptions. But if you are joining us on a mobile device, the buttons are going to be just a little different. You'll just have to tap on the screen. You'll be presented with the same options down at the bottom though. Raise hand, chat, Q&A. Especially if you're joining on a mobile device, that raise hand option on there is going to be vital, because then you don't have to type out everything on your tiny screen. You know, texting can be kind of frustrating having to do that day in, day out. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to minimize this and we'll dive in. All right. So as I mentioned, my name is Mike Dane. I'm the training director at MLS Technology. I did want to give you guys just a quick rundown on how to get into Matrix. This is fairly simple. When you guys first get into the MLStechnology.com website, which we call the MLS portal, there's going to be a big link right there for Matrix. Now, Matrix is where we have the majority of our MLS data stored. There is some information that gets pulled over from different systems. So for instance, we have tax record information stored in Realist, which is a class that we're going to be hosting on Thursday. And then we also have the transaction desk system, which actually is the storage place for all of our disclosures. There's also some showing information that can get pulled over from SentryKey, but Matrix is where all of the actual listing data, so just the raw data that you guys would have to post for any properties that you guys have for sale, will be posted. So let's go ahead and start there. So when you first get into Matrix, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to be presented with this home page. Now, the home page has what are called widgets. That's these little sections. You've got the little headers. If you hold your cursor over any of those gray headers, you'll be able to see that you can actually move these around. When you click and drag, you'll see the little dotted lines underneath that indicating where, if you release, it'll drop. So you can rearrange this pretty much to your heart's content. There is another section down here at the bottom called additional. You can see mine actually has a bunch of things filled in here already. What this additional is actually doing is allowing you guys to get rid of any of the widgets that you don't want. So for instance, if you've already been through a lot of the learning lab stuff, or you don't want to see this particular widget anymore, you can minimize it using this little arrow that collapses it. But if you just want to get rid of it because you're just not using it, you can hit that little X. Notice what happens down here at the very bottom of the additional widget. It just dumps that little tab, the little header bar underneath the additional widget, and then we can collapse that widget down. Now there's only 3 widgets on here that I would recommend that you guys always leave at least visible. The news and alerts, which actually doesn't let you get rid of it. This is where you guys will see any notifications that'll pop up letting you know that your listing is expiring, or if you have a pending listing that's actually going to be reaching its anticipated closing date soon. There's all sorts of different notifications or even news alerts like this disclosures on MLS. These kinds of things will be posted and will remain there until you've read them, or depending on if it's something important, it'll actually stay there indefinitely, like this disclosures. Now, one of the other ones that I recommend keeping that you can't, or that you can get rid of, excuse me, is this search function over here to the right. Now, my favorite searches we're going to be discussing a little bit later. We'll talk a little bit about how to put in listings and what we can do with this My Listings section. Even the hot sheets in the Market Watch has some customization that's fairly thorough and deep. I'll be sending you guys a little video on how to actually navigate and use the hot sheets in Market Watch. They're very quick tutorials that give a good explanation for what they can do. But this search widget over here on the right is our first interaction with just searching for listings in the system. Now it's broken down into just 4 different search functions. We can put in the status if we wanted to narrow down our search by that. We can put in a house number and a street name to search for maybe just the history of a property or just find any addresses that happen to match. If you have that agent that calls you up and says, hey, I know you got a buyer that might be interested in my property. Here's the address. You can just come in here, dump it in there, and run your search. And last, we have the MLS number. We'll be talking a little bit more about the MLS number later, but the MLS numbers are actually assigned to each listing, and the first 2 numbers are going to be the year that that particular listing was entered. So let's actually get a little example running here. So I have an address that I'm going to be searching for, and I wanted to show what the house number and street name will be broken down into. So the house number is just going to be referring to the very beginning of the I apologize. Give me just a moment. There's always some urgent question somebody has. Sorry about that. So the first information that you can search by is house number. Now the house number is actually going to only be a certain portion of the address. So let's say I have 33200 South 151st Street in Bixby. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be searching for the house number, again, just the very beginning of the address, and then the street name. But notice that I'm going to be stripping off the South, and I'm going to be stripping off street. In fact, I'll even get rid of this ST at the beginning or at the end of it. So it's just 33200 and then 151. So it doesn't care what the street type is, the pre-directional, the post-directional, even what city or state it's in. It's going to search the system to find out if there's any listings that match these 2 specific pieces of information. Now, when we run our search, you're going to end up finding that there's a lot of listings in the system. Even if you guys maybe are looking just for something that was active, you'll see a lot of listings that may have been put into the system a long time ago. So just to give you guys some history on this, we started doing digital records of listing data back in 1992. This is when we decided that we were going to start having listing data assigned an MLS number that was matched with its year that this particular listing was entered. So you can find some older listings in the system. These are just listings that happen to match the specific criteria that we wanted for all of our digital records. But that was when we actually began keeping all listings that are new on our system. Now, even here, when we're looking at our search results, we can see, oh, and I accidentally misremembered this, it's East 151st Street, East 151st Street South for the particular houses. Over on the left here, we start off with our MLS numbers. And as I mentioned before, the first two numbers are going to be what year that this was entered. Now, it's important to note, some of these actually are only 6-digit numbers because it dropped a preceding 0. So for instance, this particular listing was actually entered in 2008, which means that it was 08 for the beginning of the MLS number, just dropped that number, and we got to see the data there. Now, even the layout that we have for this particular screen, the results page, is the exact same layout that we've had since the 90s. This is going to be the same way that we had the information displayed back when it just came up on what effectively just looked like a giant spreadsheet, and you would have to search for the information within them. So if you guys do end up wanting to make any customizations to this, we're going to be covering how to make those changes, how to add in additional columns, and some other cool things later. But this is just going to be the general look, and we can always modify this, add details at our leisure. Now, the only thing that's really going to hold you guys back is the sort function. Now, the sort function is actually displayed here up at the top. We've got 3 different arrows showing what the sort is actually intending to sort by. Now, the first one, we've got our primary sort. It's going to show us all of our closed together, all of our expired together, all the released together. But then it also has a secondary sort, which happens to be redundant in this case because they're all in the same school district. But this secondary sort will help us allow any of the maybe active listings and pending listings to be grouped together by the school district within those statuses. Now, to see that illustrated, over here to the right on our tertiary sort, third sort function, we see the very bottom to the very top on closed, the very bottom to the very top on expired, and a little bit more extreme example for all of the released, starting at 500,000 going all the way up to 2 million. So if we wanted to make any changes to how things are being sorted, you can click on that arrow to change which direction it sorts by. And you can also click on the header for a different attribute to change that to be the primary sort. But notice what happened when we ended up clicking on that section. It changed the sort so that the garage count is actually the primary sort method, which made this one that had 30, which is very likely not correct, down here at the very bottom, and the ones that don't have any at the top, we can switch that order. But if I end up clicking on a different header, you'll notice that it actually starts trailing along the primary, secondary, and tertiary sort. So keep that in mind whenever you guys get to customizing this screen. If you would like for one to be the primary sort and then maybe have a backup secondary sort, click on your backup first, and then click on the primary sort that you want. And you'll notice that now it keeps track of all of the listings according to bedroom, but then it's also going to take the bedrooms that are all the same and start sorting by price as a secondary. And then finally, full bathroom as a tertiary sort. So, but we'll discuss this all a little bit more later. You can always reset any of the changes that you made using that little gear icon and then going to reset system search defaults. We'll cover this a little bit more later. All right, so let's actually head back to our homepage for a moment. Before we end up going into any of the specific listings, trying to run searches, save things, set up auto emails, what we need to do first is actually ensure that all of our information is correct in the system before we actually start sending things off to clients who may or may not know you that well. So up at the top right corner, you'll see I've got a working as option, and then it shows my name. For those of you guys who are a part of a team, you can switch between which team member you're impersonating up here at the top right. If you guys don't have a team or don't have anybody that interacts with you as a team member, you won't have that working as option, so you can kind of ignore that. But the important information here is going to be under settings, where we're going to find effectively just a layout of all of the information that you guys have access to making changes to. First and foremost, our My Information tab. Now on the My Information tab, we actually have 5 separate tabs that break down each of the different ways our information is displayed, starting off with the information itself. We need to make sure that we have the correct name, correct email address, correct phone number put in, because what's going to happen is that all of this information that we see on this page will be fed over into our printer header and footer, our CMA cover sheet, and our One Home profile. We'll talk about how to customize email signature in a minute here, but if you guys get to this page and happen to notice that there's any major errors with this, like maybe your name was misspelled, or maybe they have you in there as Robert, but you actually want to go by Rob, you can actually click on this override button over to the right that allows you to make changes to those grayed out sections, like I've done here with the office email address. But I wanted to mention something important. If you guys do end up having something on this page that's incorrect, so let's say that you guys find that the email address is referring to maybe your personal email address instead of your professional one, you can still use this override option to make that change, and that way it'll display properly anywhere in Matrix. But if it's displaying improperly here without an override, so like if this is not my email address, what you can do is actually get in contact with our membership team and correct it on their side, because this is indicating that membership actually has the wrong information. Matrix collects all the information from whenever you guys first registered with the Greater Tulsa Association of Realtors or SOAR or whichever association you guys are a part of. That membership data was then fed over into this, and subsequently we make sure that that's available for you guys to display in Matrix. So if this is wrong, you can make that override, but you probably want to get in contact with us and get it corrected. Now, I also wanted to mention these other tabs. The header and footer section is actually only going to be showing up in one thing, the prints that you guys offer. Now you can choose to just print things off without a header and footer. It depends on what you guys are planning on doing with your particular print off. So you can kind of choose this on a print by print basis. But before you do anything else, you need to make sure that that information is established. Otherwise, you're going to be saddled with this basic template, which is the system default. Now, when you guys first get into the header and footer page, if you haven't been there before, you'll actually be presented with this screen that we're seeing here. There's a bunch of templates that show us just some basic information. You won't have a fancy photo that's been uploaded. You won't have a bunch of information put in here. It may just be something very generic, but see if you can find one that actually matches either maybe your kind of perspective on life or what your business is focused on. In my opinion, I always like doing something that's related to the color green because that's the best color on earth, objectively. This cannot be debated. So I'm going to hit the little button over here on the left and preview. Now, what happens is that it actually shows me now the basic information that I have over here, and then this banner over here to the right. If I want to go back after I've made my selection and decide on a different option, we can always choose this select a different banner image theme. But if I'm happy with the one that I chose, I can add a photo on here. As you guys can see, it just shows in this little circle here. We can even add in different branding options, which is literally just changing which information is going to be displayed. So if I wanted my cell phone number and then my office number, you notice if I choose those from the drop down here, it switches which one's displaying on the actual header. So if you guys don't want them to be displayed at all, so like if I just want my name, my cell phone number, and my email address, you can get rid of those sections that don't include information you want just by choosing the blank space up at the top. There you go. Keep it simple. They have less to focus on, or however you guys would like to establish that. All right. Now you do have the option to choose custom colors as well. So if you guys happen to have the hexadecimal codes for whatever the corporate branded colors are, you guys can get that information, add those in there so that you can have the exact coloring that you would like. You can even upload a custom banner image. So in tandem with getting the corporate colors put in, if you guys had a banner that your company had made for Matrix print-offs, you can upload that banner image here. Now this section used to be a lot more important. We used to have a portal that the clients would actually access that was a little bit more rudimentary. It was a much older version of the client portal. They've made some dramatic improvements on those. But one of the things that they did get rid of was this header being kind of persistent at the top of everything that they were doing. So instead, we now have a one home profile that we'll be updating, and I'll show you guys that in a moment. Now the print footer, similarly, is just going to be a couple basic options. You choose which elements you want to have at the bottom there, and then you choose what the colors are going to be for that section. Again, you can choose custom colors if you would like, or you can just use the default theme colors. But once you're happy with any of the changes that you've made, just make sure to hit save. The CMA cover sheet, we're not going to cover very deeply. This is just going to appear whenever you guys are using the CMA report option. This is something that we cover in our CMAs and Matrix class. And if you guys are interested in that class, you can go to our webinars button, and we actually have that hosted next week. Actually, coincidentally, the same time on Wednesday. But the next section is the email signature. I really like this section. They've dramatically improved this recently, just because instead of requiring you to use all of these tools that they have up at the top of the page to try and make your signature look the same as it does elsewhere, what you can now do is just copy the signature that you guys are already using and then just paste it in here. And that's it. It copies over all the fonts, it copies over all the formatting, it even copies over any images. So if you guys have an image that's a part of your signature, like my certified trainer, whatever, all of that information will be added on there without you having to upload anything or find the HTML or URL or whatever it is for that stuff. Just copy, paste it, you're good to go. Now, additionally, we have the One Home tab. I mentioned before that when we send information off to our clients, they'll have access to portions of the information that you have over here on the Information tab. And this One Home section is defining what information they will see. So first and foremost, if you guys would like to add a photo, make sure that you switch this from no photo over to use custom photo. And there's an option to upload one there. The contact information is going to show the information that we had over on that home page. If there was anything that we hit override on, you'll notice that that's actually been updated. But I did want to clarify, if you guys have information that's incorrect on this Information tab, again, make sure to reach out to membership. Down at the very bottom of the page, after all of the information that we provide to our clients, we have another section where you can add in any comments that you would like to make, maybe a description of your business goals, your specific demographics that you guys work with, clientele, the properties you're specialized in, whatever you guys want to add. Now, we also have a section down here at the bottom for adding in YouTube or Vimeo videos. So if you guys have an interview or maybe an introduction to your office, whatever, you can add those in there. Coincidentally, this is actually the only place in the system that you can add a YouTube video. But we'll talk about that a little bit more when we discuss the virtual tours. All right. So now that I've gone through and made sure that all of my information on the Information tab is up to date, I got my printer or print header and footer added. Didn't have to worry about the CMA cover sheet, has everything on there that I want. I've got my email signature uploaded, and my One Home profile is up to date and ready to display the information that I want it to show. So after we're all set with that, now let's actually start talking about the search so we can find the listings and get those sent off to our clients. So I'm going to hop back to my homepage. I mentioned before that we have our favorite searches over here on the left. The search functions are also built into the hot sheets and the market watch. But on the home page, the only real search that we can actually manually enter in criteria is over here on the right. If we want to go into a little bit more in-depth search, something that I can customize right now and not just something that I've made before or has been made by the system, we go to this search tab up at the top. Now, our search tab is broken down into the 4 different property types that we have, which is residential sales, commercial properties for sale, vacant land for sale, and then residential properties that are for lease. Now, we don't clarify the residential sale, and we don't clarify that this leasing is only for residential, but it's worth mentioning since we do get questions about this from time to time. We do not offer an option for commercial lease. But in addition to the 4 main property types, we also have what's called a cross-property search. Now, this means that you're going to be making a search that combines any of the property types into a search that's just, oh, sorry, I thought somebody was going to try and interrupt us again. This cross-property search allows us to search for every property type. This is a great way to familiarize yourself with a certain area because it'll show anything that's residential for sale, the vacant land that might be in that area, if there's anything for lease, any commercial buildings that are up for sale. All of that information can be found in one spot. But the majority of the time, people are going to be spending in this residential section, which is where we'll jump to in a moment here. Now, after we get through all of our property types, which is going to be exclusively looking for listing data, we do have a section here for the public record search. Now, interestingly enough, the public record search is actually identical in functionality to what we have in Realist. You guys notice there's a Realist tax button up here at the top that allows you to jump directly into the Realist homepage. Again, we have a class covering this on Thursday at the same time as our class today. Here we go. But when we go to this public record search, the public record search gives us a few more options than what Realist offers on its quick search. This is just stuff that you can add to the My Search function in Realist, but it's the basic things that you would need if you did actually have some tax records that you wanted to pull up. Now, one of the benefits of actually searching with this method is that if we do end up having something that's, run our search, there we go. We can find properties pretty quickly and easily. We've already found at least one match down here at the bottom. We can see our live match count. And I see that I barely put in any information. I didn't even clarify which county or which city or anything else, but I can go directly into that search result and then just click on the parcel number to load all of the tax information. Now, as I mentioned before, with Realist is actually feeding information over into Matrix. But since this is actually a search that's been done on Matrix, we can jump back to any of the previous listing data directly using this last listing tab, and we can see any of the previous listings as well. Now, there's also a Photos tab, History, Parcel Map, and Flood Map. The rest of these are actually going to be covered a little bit later. The main one I wanted to show you guys is just that you can get in, see all the tax information so that if you were doing any research on a property, maybe you guys have a seller that's interested in selling this property, but you need to learn more about it, you can do all of that within Matrix. Oh, I see we got a question. There you go, Patty. It should have an option to unmute on your screen.
Okay, yes, I was wondering, when you're searching for like a potential listing and you know you have the correct address and you've physically seen the house, but you cannot pull it up. Can you tell me why that would be, or will we cover that later or something? Because I have that situation and I know the house is there and I know I've got the right address, but.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest, oftentimes when I'm running into problems like that, because I have had that particular situation before, the thing that I always try to go back to is to try and get the tax parcel number from the client. Because then no matter if the 911 address has not been assigned to the property, you'll always be able to find it with that tax parcel number.
Well,
Now,
I'm talking about though, if you kind of drive by a house, you're wanting to think about it's empty, and you're wanting to think about listing, and you don't know who the seller is, and so
oh,
you
I
go
got
in
you.
and try to. Obviously, you don't know the seller's name or the owner's name, so you go in and try to search. I mean, it's a physical house; it's there. They would have had to pay tax on it, but you can't find it anywhere.
Hmm. In situations like that, I mean, you can always go in and do a map search. So for instance, if you know where the property is physically located, you can click on this map. Oh, let me clear this off first. You can click on this map search button and then just zoom into the area that that was located. Or if you have a property that was nearby that you know you can find, you can always jump in. Let's do, so like if we knew that the neighbor was the one that we actually were trying to track down, I can get the property that I can find and then just click on the property that's next to it and then click on tax to pull up the tax information for it.
Okay. Well, I've tried that, but maybe I'm not doing something right, so I'll work with it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
I mean, worst case scenario, you get in contact with the county and let them know that you're not able to track down this property, even though it should have an address on there. Because I have done some outreach training, and I think some of the southern counties were a little bit not worse, but just they didn't have it quite as often as some of the other counties would. And it was primarily just because there was not always a lot of people, so they didn't always get the 911 addresses assigned in quick fashion. But that's what I would suspect.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. All right. And if I'll be honest, if I do end up finding any other ways to try and track that information down, I'll let you know. But that's about it for our tax record search. We also have an agent search and an office search, which allows you guys to track down any agents that happen to be in our MLS, as well as any offices that have any agents that you might need to find. Like if you didn't know who it was that you spoke with at an office, you can always go to an office, find the name, go. And then when you click on any of these offices, there's an our office's agents, which allows us to see everybody that's in that office. Now, whenever you've found a particular agent that you're looking for, click on their member number over here on the left, and there's a quick and easy access to my active listings over here to the right. So on top of all of their contact information, you can even see what they currently have listed. Finally, we have our data co-op search. And then when we go to the more option, we can see that there's also a open house search. Now, the data co-op option, kind of skimmed over this, but data co-op is actually a system that CoreLogic has created. And just as a reminder, if you guys recognize that logo from earlier, CoreLogic is responsible for creating Matrix and Realist, as well as some other pieces of software. The important thing to remember here is that Matrix actually is a system that's used throughout the entire country. The data co-op system is actually effectively kind of like a social media network for all of those Matrix systems. So any of the data that other people have entered into, let's say a MLS out in Colorado or maybe out in Arkansas, we can actually search for those particular listings in that data co-op system just because they happen to be uploading all of their data into Matrix. Now, there are a lot of caveats with that. This doesn't mean that every single MLS in the entire country is going to be able to get their data on here. And how often they update the information or the relevance or accuracy of the data is kind of going to be all over the place depending on what MLS provided that data. Now, there is an alternative to that. And if you guys are interested in it, we are presenting a class on it next week. It's RPR. So instead of using data co-op, you can always use the realtor property resource, which effectively does the exact same thing that this whole system does, except instead of being restricted to only products presented by CoreLogic, it presents almost every MLS in the country, like the vast majority of them, which I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I had a specific number that one of the RPR people gave me recently. Anyway, so let's actually dive into the searches now. So I'm going to jump in first to the cross-property search. Now I'm going to be choosing the quick XProp or quick cross-property search. There's a create your own option, and you'll find that that create your own option is found under each and every one of these. But I did want to clarify, create your own means that you're starting with a completely blank slate. I actually had to come in here and add these additional fields that included the basic things that I might need, like the status and the zip code. If you end up using any of the quick options, it's going to have all of those options just pre-built, ready to go. Now, this is probably a screen you guys are already familiar with, but I did want to clarify a couple things about the quick cross-property search. When we get in here, there's a section for property type. If we want to combine multiple property types, you'll notice that clicking on one of these at a time just only selects the one. If I hold down the control key, or if you guys are on a Mac, it's the command key. If I hold down that key and then click on another item, I can select multiple at once. So for instance, if I just kind of wanted to get a lay of the land, or maybe I had a client that didn't care if it was for sale or for lease, we can select both of those at the same time, select the city that I'm interested in, and my count down here at the bottom, the number of results that it's able to find, will be live. So it automatically shows me that there are 52 properties that are currently either for sale or for lease in Ada. So let's actually jump back and we'll start doing a quick residential search. Since this is the most common search type, this is where we're going to focus a lot of our examples. So we've already covered over here on the left, instead of it showing our property type, now we only have property subtypes. Since we've chosen to focus in on this residential search, we can see that we've only got residential property subtypes, so house, condo, townhouse, etc. The status is the only thing that's going to automatically be chosen for us. You'll notice that that happens no matter which of these I choose. If I go to quick commercial, active is the only thing that's built in. Quick residential, quick vacant, still active. So when you guys get in here, the default for the system is always going to be to try and track down listings that are currently available for sale. If you guys want to make any changes to that, you can always check the alternative checkboxes. And you'll notice that it adds in a sliding date frame. So this is actually going to have the last 180 days worth of information. You can also make changes to that by clicking on this little calendar icon and then setting a date range if you're interested in that. But I find most of the time people are just interested in doing this sliding time frame and just having that default option be the choice. We cover these specific criteria during our CMAs and matrix class, and that's next week. But just so you guys are aware, this is actually a crucial element to trying to find comparable properties. Now, we also have over here on the right-hand side some just basic elements for just entering numbers. It's important to recognize that the price is actually looking for a couple specific pieces of information. It's going to automatically turn anything and everything that I put into this price tag into the thousands. So if I have something that's $500,000 that I'm searching for, I just need to type in 500. This little checkbox here to the right is actually what turns that on or off. So if you guys did want to find out if there was any properties that were $500, or let's say that there was 999, and then I'm going to add a negative sign to see if there's anything less than that. Oh, look at that, no matches. But if I do under 999 with the checkbox, that's the majority of our listings. Now, the negative sign isn't the only one that works. So for instance, if I wanted to do 300,000 or less, I just put in 300. It's automatically 300,000. And then this little negative sign is actually going to say anything that's under 300,000. If I reverse that and put a positive on there, the plus sign is going to indicate anything that's over $300,000. That's the starting point. And then finally, if we want to do a range, this is probably what you guys already have some experience with. You just put in 150 to 250, and it'll automatically search for anything within that particular price range. Again, automatically in the thousands. If we end up wanting to put bedroom counts or bathroom counts with those same plus or minus qualifiers, or even give it a range, you can just go down here, 4 plus. That narrowed our search down a little further. Total number of baths, I'm going to do 3 plus. Narrows it down even further. And again, all of this has been done without adding any location information. But last number that I wanted to show you guys was actually this house square footage section. And actually, maybe just out of curiosity, with that raise hand button, have you guys ever seen any properties on the system that have 0 for the square footage? Oh, good. Yeah. I mean, it's not common, but it does end up happening from time to time. We also want to clarify why that's happening. So if you do end up running across a listing that only has 0 for the square footage, it's because there's only 3 different valid sources that we accept whenever you put in the house square footage. It has to be from either the building permit, the tax record, or an appraisal. If it's not from one of those 3 sources, you have to put in 0 for the square footage, and you have to put in not reporting for house square footage. The reason why we ended up having to do this was because we had a little legal incident a while ago where someone ended up going in, putting in a listing into the system with the square footage that the owner had reported. The owner, of course, was trying to pump up the numbers, and when the house was finally sold, the seller, the buyer, ended up running the appraisal, finding out that they had been shorted a few hundred square feet. So it was kind of a big deal. There's a big legal battle about it. Long story short, we ended up deciding that we have to get it from one of those 3 sources. And if asked, you have to be able to provide that information. So you can't just put this information into the system and expect that if somebody has a question about it, you can just be like, oh, it's in the appraisal. Okay, well, can we verify that? No, you have to be able to provide it. So even if the owner says, oh, we had an appraisal done, it ended up being whatever number, you still have to have that paperwork on file or you might get in trouble. But that being said, since we do have the possibility of listings actually being entered with 0 for the square footage, it doesn't mean that there's no square footage for the property. It doesn't mean you can't find out at least an estimate. So if I put 0 for house square footage, I don't have any matches. Let me clear out some of my previous criteria. There we go. So I'm going to check these out. We've got 25 listings. I'm just going to click on results, either over here to the right or down here at the bottom. And when we look at the results from here, I can see square footage is 0 for all of them. I'm going to click on one of those listings though. And oh, they didn't put in a house size. Let's see if somebody did. Here we go. So here's a property where they put in the residential listing. They ended up saying that they didn't have one of the 3 valid sources, but they provided us a house size, which allowed us kind of to get an estimate of what the property is without explicitly giving a number to the potential buyers. This way, we're not accidentally falsely advertising something, and we can still provide them with an estimate of how much space there is. So fairly simple. This is a pretty unusual listing. Huh. Nope. Not great to have to find something that might not be a good listing whenever you're working on a class. But anyway, I'm going to go back to our search results. So if we do end up in a case where, again, can't advertise what the actual size is of the property, there is that separate option to provide the house size, which makes things a little bit easier. But let's head back to our criteria. Let's say that we do have a specific area that we were interested in, and we wanted to make sure that there was, let me just do Tulsa here. There we go. We wanted to make sure that we didn't unintentionally include or not include some listings that my client might be interested in. When I go to the house square footage, I can actually put in 0 to ensure that I see all of the listings that have 0 for the house square footage, and then add in any of the additional criteria that my client might be interested in. So for instance, if they had a specific house square footage range, or maybe just, we want more than 2,000 square feet, then we can go into our results, find any of the properties that don't have the square footage, do a quick investigation to make sure, oh, looks like, oh, nope, this doesn't happen to be in that square footage range that they were hoping for. So when we go back to my criteria, I can just get rid of that and we're good. All right, so let's now talk about this middle section here. We've kind of avoided talking about it so far. We've got some status and subtype. We've got some numbers related to the property. But every time we've been searching for something, it's just been finding properties all over the map. So if I click on the map button, you'll see that without adding any criteria to where we're searching, it's going to find properties that are all over the place. So don't get your hopes up. This might be one of the first sections that you want to clarify. So first and foremost, we have a map search button. We're actually going to cover this a little bit more in depth after we take a 10-minute break at the top of the hour. But there is a proximity search option. So even if you guys don't necessarily have a specific area that you wanted to draw onto the map, or a specific zip code or whatever, you do have the option to search within a certain distance of a certain property. So for instance, if I wanted to be within 2 miles of ORU, South Lewis Avenue, see how whenever I type in an address up here, it should automatically come up with an autofill option. So we can click on that and it'll say that map area selected. So now I'm seeing only properties that are within 2 miles of this particular property. If I go to my map, it'll even illustrate that for me so I can see where it is that it's actually going to be running that search. But back to my criteria, I'm going to clear the map off. We also have a little address search function. So again, just like we saw when we were on the home page where it's broken down by just parts and pieces of the address, you can add those different elements in there and make sure that you guys are finding properties that are specific. So rather than running criteria searches, if you know the address of the property that you're looking for, you might want to clear your status out, but you can run your search from here. Now the school district, city, county, and zip code all have a couple little extra buttons over here to the right. Now the little question marks are meant just to show you guys the additional options on here. But it's important to note that this little button that looks like a couple windows over each other provides you with a separate option for running the search and then also selecting the items from this list. So there's a couple different ways for us to do this. Let's say that I wanted to do Ada and Latta. Latta is a school district that's immediately next to Ada. So I'll type in Ada. Notice how it automatically selects that for me. And then I'm going to put in a comma, the same way that we did with our house square footage. And I type in Latta. Now, this automatically swings me down and shows that that's highlighted. But if I scroll back up to the top, Ada is still selected as well. Now, if I wanted to make sure that the listings that I'm finding are within Ada city limits, that's going to be a separate tab over here. And that may or may not end up increasing or decreasing the listings. Now, if I don't like having to scroll up and down on this list or kind of guessing what this is, you can always click on this button up here at the top, get that little window to pop up, and then start searching from here. So like if I didn't remember how to spell Sequoia, I can just start typing, oh, it's S-O-Q-U-O-A, right? Click on add, and it moves it from this list over to this list. I'm a little partial to how this particular search function works, because then it'll automatically fill out the correct information. And let's say if I do end up deciding to choose multiple, there we go. I can see all of those at once, and it's automatically got the correct information up here at the top. County and zip code work the exact same way. Just so you guys are aware, you don't have to fill in that much information either. So for instance, if we just wanted to do Pontotoc, start typing, click from the dropdown, and you're good to go. If we wanted to add in any of the nearby counties, start typing, notice it auto fills for us. There we go. Easy peasy. All right. Let's go ahead and actually run a little bit more advanced search. So I'm going to jump in here, clear something out real quick. There we go. So we see that over here on the left, we've got some basic elements. We've got some details about the attributes of the property. We've got our location search, which is going to be showing up here in the middle. And then down here towards the bottom, we have just some additional features that you can actually add on that are not numerical. So obviously all of these over here on the right are going to be a lot of numbers. Down here at the bottom are just basic elements, attributes of the property. But let's say that the thing that I'm actually trying to find is not based on any of the details that are already provided on this criteria page. Down here at the very bottom, there's an additional fields section, which allows us to add in any of the other parts and pieces of the listing data that the agent provided when they put the listing in the system. So if I click on add, it presents you with the comprehensive, massive list of just every single criteria that you can even search by in our system. I mean, this list is overwhelming. So usually what I recommend people to do is just like we saw when I was looking for the school districts, or it'd be the same thing for the cities. You can have this huge list, scroll down and see if you can find which one it is that you wanted to click on, and then add it. Or if you wanted to make your life, exponentially easier, just use this little search function at the bottom. So for instance, if I knew that I wanted to have a client find properties that are resident or not residential, excuse me. Rural development. I know that that's a finance option for them. So instead of searching for, let's say, rural, that's not going to come up. We need to actually search for the basic criteria. So in this case, again, it's a finance option. So I'm going to type in finance options and add. Now, instead of having to conjure that from some knowledge that you have prior, you can always go back to the product or the property data forms. This is back on our MLS portal under forms and contracts. We have all the different forms that we have available through the MLS and through GTAR as well. But right here, we've got MLS specific forms. From there, we have the matrix data forms. Now, on the matrix data forms page, we have it broken down into those 4 property types we discussed earlier. Now, when you click on residential, it presents you with the PDF version of that particular form. And this is searchable, so you can actually find what the section header would be if, let's say, you wanted to find out what gated access would be found under. So in my case, I'm going to do Control F. And again, Control F is going to just translate over to the Mac as Command F, but it's the same basic principle. On Chrome, the search function will be up here at the top right. Firefox happens to show it down here at the bottom left. I'm going to type in gated. This swings me down to the section here called HOA amenities, which is under the HOA information section. And I see gated access would have to be checked on that HOA amenities in order for me to be able to search for it on the matrix search. So I head back to matrix. I go to the search, HOA amenities, add, and we're all set. So I'm going to head back to my page here. And let's actually clear off my search results. Make sure I check active again. And I'm going to start searching now for properties that have gas range. I'm down to 678 matches. I'm going to scroll down here to USDA rural development, 150. And HOA amenities, I wanted to make sure that it's a gated access community, down to 4 matches. Now, just as a reminder, since I cleared out my search criteria and I'm only searching for stuff that's active with these additional criteria down at the bottom, this is not going to be located in a specific area. So if I go to my map, I'm going to find these are kind of spread out all over the state. We've got some that's over here east of Claremore. We've got a couple in the Tulsa area, and then one down here in Durant. Right? Durant, is that right? Yeah. So if you guys end up in a situation like that, and just as a reminder, setting up your criteria for, let's say that we wanted to do Tulsa County instead, 0 matches. All right, maybe let's do Rogers, Wagner. Here we go. Hey, now we're back to 2 matches. so not too close to Tulsa. So now let's actually jump into one of these listings and take a look at it. So if we just filled out our search criteria, I can go to my map and double check that everything is located in the right area. And then I can also jump over to my results and see those results in, again, that same layout that we've had for the last 20 years, 30 years, excuse me. So if we wanted to see the listing data for either of these listings, I can click on the MLS number up at the top here. What this is going to do is present me with the basic data about this particular property, and then a bunch of tabs that allow me to navigate to further information. So the listing shows all of the information that the client, or the agent had actually added to this listing. The tax information is going to, again, pull over from Matrix, or from Realist. The Realist tax information gets automatically appended to any listing that has either the same address as the property does in Realist or the same parcel number as the property has. We also have a tab here for photos. One of the nice things about checking the photos tab is that if they had added any captions to any of the photos, you can see those captions from here. And then just click on the photo, it'll zoom you in. You can scroll through these at your leisure. We also have the history tab. The history tab is going to show us the basic information about when this listing was uploaded. So we can see it down to the minute. We can see when it went pending, when it went back to active again, and then it looks like it even had a $5,000 price drop, which we can see the exact minute that this was changed. One of the additional features that we're going to be adding in the very near future is whenever you end up making a change to the compensation amount, so whether that's increasing, decreasing, or whatever, we're going to add that as an element onto this listing data. Unfortunately, we didn't need that before, but thanks to some shenanigans that people have been trying to pull, we're going to add that on there to make sure that people aren't getting advertised with a different commission than what they end up getting to the closing table with. But anyway, that being said, that's going to appear sometime in the near future. We'll make a big announcement of it whenever it happens. We also have the parcel map tab. This is broken down into 3 different sections. We see a contextual map that shows the satellite where the parcel is. We see the parcel dimensions laid out with the numbers on here. And then down at the bottom, we get another contextual map where we can zoom in, zoom out, and see where the property is located relatively. All right. And then finally, we've got the flood map. Flood map is going to show us not only where the property is located, but also apply the FEMA flood map designations. You can see down here at the bottom, the colors kind of match the sections up on the screen. And then the section header above the map is actually going to show you explicitly whether or not this particular area is safe from floods and what the designation would be. All right, let's head back to our search results one more time. You may notice some overlap with what information you have access to from the search results. Over here on the far left, again, where we clicked on the MLS number, there's also a little icon that allows us to view the photos in advance of actually getting into to check the rest of the listing data. We also have a little map option, which allows us to pull up a little window so we can again see the contextual area that this is located in. We can even add those layers that we wanted just to ensure that without having to load the listing, we can still see the information that we need before we get into it. Now, over on the far right-hand side, we have to history, which again is redundant. It still has the exact same information. It's just going to be a separate window so that you guys can go back and forth between those. Oops, let me close all these. You can kind of switch between them. We also have a start a transaction option. This is going to take the information from the listing and just dump it into a brand new transaction in Transaction Desk. It's going to include any of the documents that were actually uploaded to the listing. You can check the documents in advance by clicking on View Documents. This is where you guys should be able to find any of the property condition disclosures. It's worth mentioning, since this is something that we're trying to crack down on, nearly every listing in our system needs to have the disclosures added to it, unless the property is exempt or if there's some other reason why the property won't have a property condition disclosure. but always make sure that those are uploaded. Just because it says manage documents via transaction desk does not mean that you guys have to use transaction desk for your system for paperless transactions, signings, et cetera, et cetera. It's literally just a storage facility for those disclosures, and that's it. So we do have a couple extra buttons here that are missing just because these listings don't have, in this first column, any open houses. And then in the second column, there would be any virtual tours. I mentioned this casually before, but just as a reminder, the virtual tours that you add to the system, whether it's like that virtual dollhouse, or if you guys have a video or drone footage, or just a really cool slideshow, all of the virtual tours that are added into our system have to be added as the unbranded versions. The information that we have entered into the MLS will be syndicated out to multiple websites. If a virtual tour has any branding on it, that's actually breaking National Association of Realtor rules. The last option on here is going to be the Realtor Property Resource. I mentioned this before, but this is a tool that's actually been provided by the National Association of Realtors. If you guys have any interest in it at all, I would very strongly recommend attending the class on it. They also host their own webinars. We just happen to have ours set up for CE credit. But when you click on this link, it's going to open up the most comprehensive information that you guys have access to as realtors. Realtor Property Resource was designed to be effectively a lightning rod for any questions that a client might have. This is where you can find not only any of the listing data, all the tax data will be added, and there's even a bunch of information that's been built into this, tracking the history of this particular property, its price, its appraisals, its valuations, et cetera, et cetera. Any charts to learn more about the area that you're working within. There's even a built-in refined value or even a CMA process that's all provided to you guys at no extra charge, just because you're members of the National Association of Realtors. So even if you guys end up moving to a different state, different MLS, whatever the case may be, you'll always have access to RPR as long as you're a licensed realtor. All right, but we're going to go through a little bit more information after we get back from a little 10-minute break. So I will see you guys back here at 2:12. I'm going to put the video back on the screen. If you guys see that video go away and the music stops, that means we're getting back to it. All right, let's get back to it. So where we left off, we were looking at the search results and then taking a look at some of the results that we found. When we were going through this, we had narrowed down thanks to some additional fields. We searched using the HOA amenities to make sure that we were only looking for properties that had gated access. We put in the county to make sure that we were only looking for properties in those counties, and then went to the results. Now, when we're looking at the results, we clicked on the MLS number to actually load the results information. So if we wanted to find out more about the property, we could go through each of these different tabs to track down additional information. One of the things that we didn't talk about is just under this listing data that's been provided, there's a little tab that allows us to drop down and see all of the locations and details about each of the individual rooms in the house and what floor they happen to be on. Now, this is something that's not required to provide on each of the listings, but I do want to clarify why this is so important. My mom, for instance, has arthritis. They were looking for properties that had the master bedroom on the ground floor because obviously going up and downstairs is going to be a little difficult for her. So when she was searching for properties, this was an element that was actually vitally important. It was effectively just a deal breaker for her. If the main bedroom was not on the first floor, they weren't even going to look at it. Now, that being said, we have yet to cross that threshold into saying that providing the room details is required, but I do want to clarify that this is something that I would strongly suggest just for the sheer purpose of if you have those people out there that are looking for something so specific, if you don't provide the information at all, they won't even take a look at your property to begin with, even if it matches the criteria that they're looking for. So beyond that, let's go back to our search results. I'm going to click on this single line display button to bring us back to where we were just looking. I promised earlier that we would discuss how to customize this page. So if there's something that you had been looking for specifically, so for instance, if I wanted to clarify the square footage, well, that field's already filled in here. But if I wanted to clarify the acres for these properties, I would have to click on each of these and then come down here to check the acres, hit next to move to the next listing. Oh, this one's got even more acres, hence the dramatically larger price. But if I go back to this single line display and want to customize this a little bit, I mentioned before that we could click on the headers for each of these to change what the sort order is. But if you click over to the right of the header, so into this gray space, you can see that there's a remove column option and an insert column option. Now, remove column is clearly just going to get rid of it. So for instance, if I was searching only for houses, seeing house every single time is going to get a little bit annoying. So I can click on this blank space, click on remove column, and now my search shows only the information that I'm interested in. I can add in additional options by clicking on that blank space and then do insert column. You'll notice, just like we saw when we were searching for additional fields to search by, this provides us a massive list of every single element that we can search by. So I always recommend just using that search function at the bottom. I'm going to type in acres, apply, and now I've got my acres added on here as well. Now, last, if we end up wanting to move things around, instead of clicking on the gray space, you notice how my cursor is that four-sided arrow. I can click and drag to move these around as well. So for instance, if I wanted to put this here, maybe add in the city. There we go. Now this actually shows a little bit more complete information that I might be interested in. If I have clients that are not going to end up having kids, maybe it's an older couple and they're not going to have any kids in their house, remove column for the school district, and I've still got all the information that I need. Now, I'm providing specific examples, but if you guys do end up wanting to play with this, you can always cater this to maybe even just a specific client or a specific search that you've run. And then if you want to go back to the basic search elements, you can just click on this little gear to the right and then do reset to system search defaults. If that's not the case, if you guys do end up customizing this to the point that you're actually really happy with the way that it appears and you want to wait, what? Insert column, acres, apply. There we go. If you guys do end up adding something on here and you're like, you know what, this is going to be something that I'm going to need all the time. Get everything rearranged, set your sort options into what you would like it to be. Like if I wanted price to be the primary sort and I wanted it to be largest to smallest, I can switch that up and then save this as my default. This means that the next time I actually run a search in the residential section, I can just set my current display, sort order, etc. as a starting default so that when I leave Matrix and come back the next day, come back the next week, when I run my search, it's always going to be showing my results in the exact same way. I come in here, I can see everything's in the same order. I've got my square footage, my acres displayed, and it's got the largest price at the top. All right. So let's now talk a little bit about our search options down at the bottom. So I'm going to jump back to a search that we did a little earlier. So I'm going to hit this recent searches button. And I'm going to find one that has a decent amount of properties on it. Let's do this one right here. So I've got a good amount of properties to be able to view here. If I want to, I can actually send this information off to clients using the email, print options. There's an export option if we wanted to just get the data from it. There's a quick CMA button. But let's say that we wanted to do any of these options. If I hold my cursor over these, it keeps on telling me you must check at least one item. What that's referring to is over here on the leftmost column, we have these little check boxes here that allow us to select which of the listings we want to interact with. As soon as I checked any of those checkboxes, it lights up each of those options. So we check the checkboxes. We've got email, print, CMA, directions, stats, export, quick CMA, and showing time. The easiest of all of these, of course, is going to be email. When we click on this, we just put in who we're going to be sending it to, whether it's just an email address that you guys wanted to send this off to. So if I had my email address ready to go, I can start typing. There we go. And send that off as a one-off email. But let's say that we do actually want to have a little bit more comprehensive relationship with this client. Maybe they've been searching for a while and you're going to want to start setting up extra options or checking their preferences. And if they get sent a listing, we want them to be able to save it as a favorite or set up auto emails. Pretty much everything that's cool in the system, anything that they can actually interact with, is going to require them being created as a contact. Now, I put in an email address here already, but check this out. If you hit create new contact, there's only 3 pieces of information that you need: first name, last name, email address. If you've already got their email address, it's pretty likely that you also have their first and last name. Get them set up, and that's it. You don't have to worry about it anymore. It'll keep track of every time that you've sent them a listing. You can set up auto emails where it'll just automatically send them listings. If they end up going to the One Home portal and finding a property that they like, they can favorite that, and you can keep track of that under your contact information within Matrix. So very strongly recommended that you guys don't just come in here and fire off an email to somebody's email address willy-nilly. Come in, create a new contact, and that way you guys can keep track of them in the future as a real bona fide client. Now, beyond getting the recipient, beyond getting the recipient set up, you do have the option to put in a carbon copy to someone else. You can blind carbon copy yourself a message. I personally am not particularly fond of this. I understand why people would like to see this, just so that they automatically know that the email was sent off to their client. But I have noticed a lot of issues with understanding what this blind carbon copy actually does. The functionality on the messages that are sent out as a blind carbon copy actually come through with agent level permissions, which means that you can't favorite something, you can't end up running new searches for the client. So it's not really, it's letting you see what they're seeing, but it's not letting you interact as they would. So just bear that in mind whenever you blind carbon copy something to yourself. There is also send a link via SMS text message. If you guys did go through and add in a phone number, or in this case, a specific cell phone number, they'll be able to receive that text message link. You do have a space for subject and email body. Both of those you can fill out at your leisure. And you can even edit your signature from this screen if you have to. But beyond that, it's fairly simple. Whatever listings that you checked. So I've got 5 checked right now. If I go to email, it'll say email 5 listings. We can always check any of the any of the emails that we sent off under the My Matrix and then sent email. This shows us anything and everything that we've ever sent, whether it was to a specific client or whether it was something that you guys sent off to an email address. So in this case, it would show up as a direct email. But I also wanted to point out, when you guys are searching, you can also do a print. And if you do end up customizing the results page, so if you guys add in the acreage or remove some columns or change the sort method, whatever the case may be, it's automatically going to use that as the single line option up here at the top. That thing that we kept on seeing that said single line display, this is where it's made more explicit. Any of the saved functions that you guys have, so any customizations that you've made to the layout, you can save those, and those will actually appear with this My prefix. We don't cover that in our basic class, but if you guys are interested, we do have an advanced matrix and realist class. And there's also some video tutorials on how to get those set up on our YouTube channel, which I believe we include a link on. If we don't, I'll make sure that that's included on the email when we send off the recording. But when you're looking at these print options, it's important to notice that there's actually 5 prints that are not allowed to be sent off to a client. It's the ones that are labeled agent at the beginning. Now, part of the reason why we don't allow these to be sent off is that they can potentially include information that's not meant to be publicly consumed. This will include things like what the compensation amount is and other details that the client maybe shouldn't see, like the broker remarks. So if you guys are interested in sending a print off to a client, you can always use the exact same options that are built in under client. So each of these is almost identical to what you guys would be sending off with these other ones, except they don't include any non-public information. Now you notice that I'm selecting multiple items at once. I'm just holding down Shift to do that. But you do still have the exact same option that we mentioned before. If you guys are on a list, and this is universal for computers, if you're on a list and you want to select multiple items, hold down Control on Windows or Command on Mac, and you can select separate items. So if we wanted to get a combined collection of these where it has full with photos, a quick CMA that's a synopsis, and then a 3-up comparison, we can print this off to a PDF or email it, or we can even just send it straight to the printer. But when it creates these, it's just a file. So if you wanted to maybe create this, double check that it has the right information, and then send it off, this is how you guys can save it and then print it. Oh, mine's doing this thing again. I have a problem with my account where it keeps on putting the thing up at the top, which I think is, oh, first page, last page. That's what it was. So header and footer. That should actually fix the problem. Oh, and I see Patty's got a question. There you go. It should be ready for you.
Okay, the question I have is, if when you're doing that, if you're sending off an email and you accidentally, you have it on the Agent 360, does it go, it goes ahead through One Home, it goes ahead and sends the client. It won't let you actually send that information to the client, correct?
Correct. Yeah, there is no email option for any of the agent ones. So you actually can't send those unless it's just the summary, which is just a really super basic list.
You can print those, but you can't email them. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem. There we go. That's a good question. All right, so let's head back to our results. So that's our email option and our print option. We're not going to discuss the big CMA report. There's a lot of steps to that, but it's very simple once you guys start getting into it. But we do have a whole class that's separated out just for how to do CMAs and matrix. It's a 1-hour CE credit that we're hosting next Wednesday. But we have a directions button as well. So for instance, if we wanted to find out how to navigate in between each of these properties, when you click on directions, it'll come up with an order that kind of makes sense. If we wanted to rearrange these, you can hold your cursor over them and move the arrows up and down. I found that a lot of times people aren't as interested in this feature, but especially if you guys are working out in rural areas, which is actually where I started hearing a lot of people were using this, uh, getting this stuff printed out is actually kind of important, especially if you guys are out on all these rural roads. You need to know exactly where it is, and it's a vacant land that's out in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes it's not going to be that great to have to use your GPS. Like Patty actually mentioned earlier, the 911 address or even the address might not always get you to where you need to go. But the listings do have to be mapped by the agents when they first put the property into the system. So this will give you guys a turn-by-turn directions to that property, even if it's not something that'll show up on a GPS or a Garmin or Google map or whatever. So there are some add start and stop options as well. So if you guys had a place that you guys wanted to meet and then subsequently send the other information, that's a choice as well. So I'm gonna head back to my results. So this one. That's the one. Sorry, I had to make sure I remember that one for later. Okay, that's our directions. The stats actually comes in two different flavors. We've got a charts option and we've got a tabular option. The tabular option is just a really quick synopsis of these particular listings that you have checked. If you guys go back to the charts option, you'll have to make sure that you don't have any properties checked. So I'm going to click on this none option to uncheck those. And then we can go to charts. Now charts is going to provide effectively a search, but instead of providing just the results, it's going to take the search criteria and turn that into a chart of some kind. So for instance, it's going to see, all right, I'm going to say residential between this price range, historic sales by year, generate. Oh, the house square footage is 0. That's what I'm still dealing with. Anyway, I kind of shot myself in the foot on using this example, but this is the basic idea. Let me see if I can find, oh, this is just a bad search to run for this one, but you can run this for searches. It's going to allow you guys a lot of customization as well. We do cover this in our advanced matrix and realist class. But there's a lot of cool features that are built into this that allow you to combine charts and add different information on top of each other, and all sorts of cool things. So strongly recommend that you guys check that out at your leisure though. You're really not going to break anything in the system either. I'd be surprised if you did. But if you guys have any problems with it along the way, just get in contact with us and let us know. So down here at the bottom, we also have an export function, which just takes the data that you choose and sends it off into an Excel spreadsheet. So it takes the exact information that you guys are seeing on this page or some custom display that you guys have created in the past and sends that into an Excel spreadsheet. Not technically an Excel spreadsheet, it's a common separated value, but neither here nor there. It opens in Excel. We also have the quick CMA option. Quick CMA option is going to allow you guys to see just some basic information about each of the properties, but it lays it out in a way that's going to be a little bit more coherent for the clients. It automatically adds the header up at the top. And then we also have each of the listings broken down by the different statuses that they're in. So since this is by design meant to be something that's just for quick CMAs, but is also very useful for just grabbing some data, just remember that this is going to break it down by statuses. And then it'll have a section down here at the very bottom that shows the cumulative information. So if there was 3 active and 5 pending, 2 closed, you guys are trying to get the median value for all of those properties that you just done your search for, you can check that out at the very bottom of the page. And then each of the statuses will have their own min, max, average, and median. So finally, we have the showing time button. We are getting rid of showing time at the request of our board. Showing time was purchased by Zillow. So even though it was a fantastic and relatively easy to use product, we're going to be moving towards the Sentry Key showing service. which is actually a brand new product. The big benefit of showing time kind of going away and us moving towards the SentryKey showing service is that SentryKey showing service is actually something that's owned by CentriLock. CentriLock is also owned by the National Association of Realtors. We don't have to worry about any information leaking out of this or it getting sold to some company that doesn't really have realtors' best interests at heart. So just bear with us while we're making our transition. And if you guys do notice any problems or anything that you guys are maybe not having work the way that you would like it to work in the SentryKey showing service, just get in contact with us and let us know. They've been extremely receptive to the requests that we've made, both for things to be fixed as well as feature requests, so new things that we think would be necessary. But the only way we can really provide them any useful data is if we do have the agents letting us know what it is that they would like. So, and actually speaking of which, let's now shift back into the listing data one more time. So when we're looking at the listing information, just as a reminder, we have all those tabs up at the top, but there's also going to be some icons underneath the photos. Some of these will already look familiar. We've got the View Photos button, we've got the View Map button, which are redundant. They've got some options up here at the top for that. But you can jump directly into the tax record information. You can even load up Realist. So for instance, if you weren't entirely sure where this was physically located, and maybe the map was maybe not correct, maybe the agent didn't actually tag that to the right spot, you can click on this Realist map option and it should actually locate you over to the area. This is a brand new property. It's unlikely that this is actually completed. Where is the construction? If I'm not mistaken, I think this is actually under construction right now. Oh yeah, under construction right here. Anyway, so let's jump back. Oh, that's why I was bringing this up. The icon here for SentryKey, so that if there is actually a showing service option for this, will actually appear underneath the photos. So there will be a little yellow icon with a blue face on it that's indicating that it's actually available for SentryKey showing service. And unfortunately, just happens to be that this particular collection of listings doesn't have any. I think we're still in the matter of hundreds of listings that have this rather than kind of more pervasive. Oh, there was an icon that we didn't get to see on the search results earlier, virtual tour. If I go back to my search results, you can see those little icons over here on the right. It allows us to quickly jump into those tours if they have them available. Just as a reminder, please make sure that these are unbranded whenever you guys upload virtual tours. All right, so let's now talk about the refine options. So back on our search results page, the refine option is actually going to be tied over to our contact information. This is where we choose which contact we wanted to find out about. So if there was something that I had sent off to this particular client, I will see when it was that this was sent, the one home property fit, and then also if they've added any notes to this property as well. Now, if over time the agent has sent a lot of stuff over to someone, you'll see this list start filling out, especially if it's some search that you guys have already done. But it'll also start showing for you any of the icons of people's interest in something. So there will be a little favorite icon, a little heart that indicates that this particular property is something of interest to them. All of that can be tracked under this contacts option, which we'll cover briefly at the end. And we also have a save button. I mentioned before that there was the saved searches on the home page. The saved searches also allow us to keep track of information off the home page as well. So if there's a search that you guys are doing that maybe isn't something that you do all the time and you don't need it to show up on your homepage, when you go to this new saved search, just give it a name and you're done. But if you guys would like to add more details to it, you can add in a search name, you can connect it to a contact, you can even create a brand new contact to connect this to. And there's even an option to add this as a favorite search on your homepage, which we previously had it set to 10 as the maximum. We got them to up that to 25, which honestly is more than most people would end up needing, but it's available for you if you would like. Now, there's also a new auto email function. The new auto email allows us to take this particular search criteria. So just all of these little elements that I added. So active, it has to be in a certain place, it has to be a certain size or certain price, whatever the case may be. And I can set this up so that my client will automatically receive those emails the next time there's a new listing added. So to do so, I click on new auto email, connect the contact that I'm interested in connecting this to, give it a subject name, and they'll receive a one home invite. So this welcome email that comes off, they have to click on the link that says view properties, and that's going to subscribe them to this particular auto email. Now, if they don't end up clicking on that link, you may notice that there's some problems or that they might not be receiving the emails that you've sent or you think you're sending them. All of that can be checked pretty easily under the My Contacts section up at the top here. You can always contact us at the service desk if things are really going haywire. Now, once they've subscribed to this, they'll receive recurring emails. You can customize this text if you would like to, but down here towards the bottom, we have the schedule under which the recurring emails will be sent off. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to take the criteria that we've put in. It's going to search for residential properties that are active between this price range, that square footage, or this area, this map search, whatever the case may be, however you set it up. And as soon as a new listing happens to come into the system with those criteria met, it'll send that out either in an ASAP email, meaning that the moment they add that, within 15 minutes, your client gets the email. The daily option is going to do 8 a.m. or 6 p.m., which means that if you guys want people to maybe only receive it in the mornings and then occasionally on the evenings, maybe just do all weekdays. This way they're getting 2 emails a day. They're not getting inundated with a bunch of emails if this area or this criteria is hopping and there's just tons of new emails all the time. You can just whittle that down into just little collections that are done morning and evening. If you guys aren't interested in that, we can also switch this over to the monthly option, which means that they will be getting 1 email at the first of the month at midnight with any of the properties that happen to match the criteria and are also still available. So this could be pretty critical to clients if you guys end up wanting to adjust the schedule. With the market being the way that it is and clients being extremely motivated these days, that ASAP option might be a choice that's pretty wise, even though the one main caveat with that is that if somebody ends up adding a listing to our system that matches their criteria at 10 o'clock at night because they're burning the midnight oil, well, your client's going to get an email at 10 o'clock at night. So it's kind of a trade-off, but depending on what your client wants, that could be exactly what they need. All right. We're not going to cover the speed bar shortcuts. I'll hopefully have some time to cover the speed bar a little later. And I'm going to actually leave the carts to be discussed in the video that we have. We have a video that explains the carts a little better than I like to explain it. We also don't see too many people using carts anymore. I think it has its uses. It's just not as necessary as a lot of the other options that we have in our system. All right, so I'm going to jump back. We're going to go back to a blank residential search. And let's actually start with a map search this time. So my favorite example of doing a map search is my wife's version of Midtown. So when we were looking to move at the end of last year, we wanted to try and find something that was at least close to where we currently lived, but also close enough that I didn't have to spend too much time traveling every day. So she came up with this area that's kind of nestled in between each of the highways, which was where we kind of like to live. So there's 3 different ways for us to add in the map search functions. We've got a draw radius option, which is fairly simple. You click in one spot and then drag until you've got the radius set to what you want, or maybe the area covered that you would like, and then let go. You notice that whenever we actually drop the shape onto the map, it immediately removes any of the listings that are not in the area. It just assumes that whatever listings you're looking for are going to be found within that shape. We can add multiple shapes onto the map as well. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool to add in a couple extra details. I'm just clicking and dragging to put those on there. If I want to make any adjustments to the shapes that I've added, you can hold your cursor over those thick blue lines to make them smaller or larger. And you can do the same to the rectangle tool. If you held it over a corner, it'll allow you to make the shape taller and wider. If you hold it over just one side or the other, it'll make it taller or wider. So additionally, if you guys end up wanting to combine some shapes, but maybe there was an area that you didn't want to include, so like let's say we didn't want to be along Route 66, I can draw that section out. And this time I'm actually going to hold my cursor over the red dot over here on the far right. I've got the option to delete the shape if I just wanted to get rid of it, exclude this shape, which means that it turns it into a no-go zone that just got rid of some results. And then there's also include intersection only, which means that it's only going to try and overlap. So I'm going to delete that shape off. I'm going to clear all my shapes using this eraser. Now let's talk about our polygon tools. So the radius one, fairly simple, just a circle. The rectangle one, again, fairly simple, just a rectangle. The polygon options, though, are either a regular polygon, which means that I'm going to click in one spot. And I like to describe this as, those old conspiracy boards where you have a little pin and then you run some string along to another idea or concept. Whenever you click, you're adding a pin, and then my string can continue going until I add another pin, click, 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 and we're good. So I've set up the area that I'm interested in, kind of roughly my wife's version of Midtown. If I needed to make any adjustments to this, I can click and drag on the corners or click and drag on the lines themselves, and then I can actually add in a new corner. If I wanted to maybe stretch this down a little further, I can just click and drag, and so on. So do this with a little bit more certainty. Of course, I'm just kind of trying to do this for examples. I'm going to clear the shape. The other option that you have, so besides the click and drag, so on and so forth, we have the freehand polygon tool, which is just click and drag, and it's just going to draw the shape wherever my cursor is. So if you accidentally get distracted while you're doing this, you can make some very strange shapes. But once you let go, it finishes off the shape, and we can actually see what this looks like. Now, if we want to actually include this as a part of our search, whenever you add the shape onto the map and go back to the criteria, you'll see that this section up at the top says map area selected, which means that any of the other details that I add in here are going to have to match the listings that I'm finding in that area. If I choose to say I want city, and it happens to not include the area that I have selected on the map, my matches will go to 0. We have had a couple issues with that in the past. Just wanted to mention that. But the map area selected does treat the search, or is treated by the search as just another piece of information for it to search by. So if we wanted to make adjustments, we go to the map, we come back, map area selected, and I can start adding in details about the property that my client is interested in. Now, additionally on the map, there's some other layers and some other information that you guys can view on the map. We have the drop down over here where we can add the satellite image. This isn't necessarily recommended just because it does get a little bit dense, but especially if you guys are looking for a specific parcel or property or checking to see if there's a pool in the back or a pool in that subdivision, whatever, this is a great way to do that. You also have the option to see the map with terrain. And I happen to choose a nice flat spot in Tulsa. I mean, not hard to do with how many flat spots there are here. I grew up in Colorado, so what you guys call mountains, it's a dirt mound. Not really. Turkey Mountain's beautiful, but when you grow up with the Rockies, it's just some perspective. But as you guys can see, whenever you add the terrain on here, not only does it show just a little bit of texture to it, but if you zoom in, especially here on Turkey Mountain, you can see the actual elevation being drawn onto some of those lines. So 800 feet from sea level. All right, so I'm going to uncheck that. We also have the extra layers that you can add to the map. Now this was actually redone, I think, the year. Man, time is funny since the beginning of the pandemic. I think this was added in 2020. Anyway, what ended up happening is they added in a bunch of the additional boundaries on here under MLS statuses, parcel characteristics, and trends, a lot of the stuff that you guys used to have access to in Realist, but they also added in the Tulsa flood zone. Now, this is only applicable to Tulsa County, but if you guys work in Tulsa County, you guys can get a little bit more accurate estimation of whether or not this particular area is a flood zone, thanks to Tulsa County's records, rather than trusting that FEMA has the correct information. And as an example of that, I have a property we can look at. There we go. So this particular property, when I first came here back in 2018, the flood zone map actually cut down and in front of this particular house. And that was what was going to be, the 500-year floodplain. So the house itself was actually in the out of special flood hazard area. And then of course in 2019, we ended up having some really radical floods, ended up doing some serious damage across the state. But this ended up being adjusted, so FEMA actually moved this line back. Now, if we wanted to check to see what the Tulsa flood zone map shows now, shows over here, this is the regulatory flood zone. And then of course up here is not considered part of the flood zone. So always keep that in mind whenever you guys are trying to find that information for your lenders or bank, whatever the case may be. Okay, so let's now jump into our contact information. So the contact information we mentioned earlier, this is going to be any of the names and email addresses that we've added whenever we were sending things out. One of the cool things about this page, and something that I wish more people were aware of, because we get lots of questions about it on the help desk, when you go to this contacts page, this allows you to see not only the contacts that you've sent information to, but it also shows over here any of the carts that you've created for them, any of the notes that people have added to listings. So if they told you on that portal that they were visiting, hey, this is something that I really like, can we take a look at this? Or even sometimes they might even request for a showing within its certain time frame. All of that's going to show up under this listing notes button. Now, if there were something new that somebody had just recently added, so like for instance, this Mike Tester had actually added in a note, this shows me in little bold text that this has actually been updated recently. So I can see that this client actually has added a note that I haven't viewed yet. You can click on that. It'll show you a list of all of those listings that they've written notes on. And I can see each of those tester notes is actually put on there with a little asterisk. So just to clarify, when we were looking at the contacts page, it shows it as bold if it's something that's unread or something that you guys haven't viewed before. And when you guys get to this screen, it's going to show that little icon up there, that little asterisk showing that there's a note that they can view. So oh, they like the blue on this. All right, I'm going to see if I can try and color match that. The trees are perfect, but the yard seems like it's going to require a lot of work. Imagine that. And then we've got this one. I like the accessibility, but the fence is a bit strange. View the photos, cool. So you can gather each of the parts and pieces. They did add a feature recently to the One Home web page. So when clients are actually viewing any of the information you send them, there's a new option where they can request for a showing, and that does come through as a note. So just make sure that if you guys are interested in finding out what the client has requested, or if there's anything that they might have written or favorited or whatever the case may be, you have to come to My Matrix and then come to Contacts to see that information over here on the right. Now, additionally, if you guys wanted to get a little bit more intimate with somebody because they've got maybe a lot of favorites or a lot of notes that they've added, you can click on their name, and this will break down into each of the different individuals, the details that they've provided to you. You can edit this to add in more information. So if you guys wanted to change their salutation or their email address or their phone number, whatever the case may be, you can make those changes. We also have access to their favorites, discards, and notes at the top here. We can check any of the auto emails that we've established for them in the past. We can see any of the carts that we've created, any CMAs we've produced for them, and a cumulative collection of all of the emails that I've ever sent to this client. And I can even go back and see any of the listings that I've sent to them. So even if they never even saw this particular listing or this particular email, and I was like, oh no, there was this one that I sent to you and I wanted to make sure that you saw it, I can click on that, come back here, see all of the emails, and let them know which one it was that I was interested in showing to them. So it makes it really easy. I'm going to head back to my contacts again. It also shows any searches that I've saved for them, as well as any searches that they've saved for themselves. Now, it's important to recognize that this is something you have to come into their contact information to view. But if you have a client that's interacting a lot with that one home search, this is where you guys want to check that information. There's also the reverse prospecting. I'm going to be sending you guys a link with the video about reverse prospecting, but reverse prospecting is a function that we added a few years ago. And what it does is it actually allows for anybody that has an auto email set up for them. If the agent that actually has that listing that was emailed to this client finds out about that, they can reach out to you and it'll just say, hey, I see that you have a client. They might be interested in a property of mine, and that's it. Now, interestingly enough, when we activated this, the reverse prospecting function got a sale within a day. Somebody was actually keeping track of all of the emails that they had been sending off to other clients and stuff like that. And they checked in to see if any of the agents were actually interested in a sale. Thanks to the reverse prospecting, they were able to facilitate that communication. I'm going to be sending you guys a video that covers how to actually use the reverse prospecting function. I'd recommend taking a look at it if that sounds of interest to you guys, but it's a very useful tool. And the important note about that is that the reverse prospecting, when we first were trying to pitch it to people, a lot of people were concerned that it was going to show the contact information, but the only thing that the agent on the other end sees is going to be this reference number. So just to run through that again, I've got Mike Dane here, me technically. He's got an email that's automatically set up to send things of a certain interest to them. Whenever I end up receiving a listing as the client, I now have a possibility of having the agent that listed that get in contact with my agent to let them know that, hey, I see that your client is interested in this. Can we have a discussion? I'm not doing a very good job of explaining that right now for some reason, but I would recommend taking a look at the video. It's explained a lot better there. All right. Well, that's actually it for our presentation today. I'm going to head back to my homepage. I'm going to leave the last couple minutes here open. If you guys have any questions, I'd like to get those answered. But if you guys do end up having any questions once the class is over, you can always reach out to us at the service desk. We're open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5:30. And I'm going to put our contact information up here until I know if you guys have a question. There we go. Yeah. And again, I'm so sorry, guys. We ended up having to cancel. I have a suspicion that the numbers are just going to keep getting worse. So we may end up having to cancel in-person classes entirely for a while, but we're just going to do it on a week-by-week basis. In the interim, though, if you guys are interested, we're doing webinars every Wednesday. You're more than welcome to join us. But as far as the in-person classes go, please make sure you guys are practicing any precautions that you can. Get vaccinated, wear your masks, practice social distancing. That way we can get back to, normal, the normal that was 2019, I guess. But have a good one, guys. Since it doesn't look like we have any questions, I'm going to go ahead and close up shop. Oh, yeah, actually, go ahead, Patty.
Did you say there's a specific link for the auto search that'll go into more detail?
Yes, yeah, and in fact, actually, let me find the email again, because I can actually send off, there's a YouTube video that we have that explains the auto email and the reverse prospecting.
Okay, good.
Separately.
I didn't catch all that, and
Oh yeah, you're good.
Stumbling with it.
Let's see. Yeah, reverse prospecting is covered, and I will find our auto email search.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, perfect. I got the link. Yeah, I'll get that sent off in just a moment here
Welcome
whenever
to
we
another
get the
video tutorial brought to you by
recording
the
finalized.
MLS